Hello. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar session, Lessons Learned from Organizations' Finance Transformations. We have here myself, Janis Parthun, and my co-presenter, Steve McKechnie. So to provide a brief introduction, again, I'm Janis Parthun, a VP within RGP's consulting services team, and I lead a number of cross-functional initiatives within finance, accounting, and risk and compliance. And my background is focused on risk management, reporting strategies, developing new solutions, as well as driving continuous improvement for companies. RGP is a global consulting company serving over 2,400 clients and having to cover over 3/4 of the Fortune 500. RGP enables rapid business outcomes by bringing together the right people who together create transformative change. Steve, can you provide a brief introduction as well?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Glad to be here. I'm Steve McKechnie. I'm a vice president in our finance transformation area. I have led our software selection practice, and I'm now leading our BlackLine practice. Have spent time over the years, some say a serial consultant, but have worked for Ernst & Young, Hewlett Packard, and a few other things that I have done along the way. My first introduction into regulations was FERC 63060 regulation of the gas industry. And I hate to say it, it was almost 30 years ago. So I've seen a lot and learned a lot along the way and look forward to sharing some of those with you today. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you, Steve. So for today's agenda, what we'd like to talk about is the demand for finance optimization and automation, a walkthrough of a client scenario, and then talk about the lessons learned. So I will kick off, at least in terms of at the beginning, for the demand for finance optimization. But before we start, let's kick off our first polling question. Are you currently involved in a finance optimization and automation project? In the early stages of planning, the project is currently in progress, you've recently completed one, or it's not applicable. So we'll give it about 30 seconds to see if you can be able to answer that. And it would be interesting to see in terms of the audience who are currently in progress working on a transformation project.
Great call.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, interesting enough. We have about 40% of the audience here that currently have a project in progress. So great. All right. So with that, I'd like to initially talk about some of the trigger points leading to finance optimization. And, there tends to be a trigger point that leads an organization to start thinking about finance optimization. And this could be either from a regulatory development and the change in the standards, or a company transformation as it grows and matures. Or it could be just a shift in the CFO's role in having to be positioned to be value creators and to be able to provide operational insights to the business units and partners. And I like to be able to discuss each of these triggers in a little bit more detail on the next few slides. So from a regulatory perspective, and as standards evolved, the finance auditors are required to emphasize on the completeness and accuracy of the evidence. But then at times, there could be multi-step tasks that involve the combination of systems and spreadsheets. And this is where it becomes harder to validate. So this is also where we're starting to see emerging trends in technology that's relevant to the finance function, as well as audits, to be able to improve operational efficiency, as well as auditability. So I wanted to at least share one perspective, which is from the PCAOB, the regulatory body that oversees the audits for public companies. And when auditors are seeking to audit client source information, This is where it's important to have companies to have strong support or electronic trail of the task or control activity. And having to confirm the completeness and the accuracy of the information provided by the entity or the company. It continues to be a key topic and internal controls for financial reporting observation for the PCAOB. So it really is a clear indication that this is an important topic for the regulatory body, having to have, be able to confirm the source information. And it was also in one of their prior PCAOB observation reports pertaining to the revenue and other significant accounts. The other aspect is that the PCAOB is also recognizing the increasing use of technology by auditors and really do see the benefits of the use of that and support that. So this could be in terms of having to support the audit process and addressing unpredictability, where the technology aids the auditor in identifying transactions outside the traditional selection criteria. This could be audit procedures, where technology can be able to help reevaluate procedures to align to the client's information, so that the planned audit response is really customized to the company or the audit client. This can also be the risk of material misstatements, so that the risk can be reduced by performing the test repeatedly, because you can use it with technology, having to conduct more efficient testing, as well as having to assess a larger coverage to minimize the risk. So now, in terms of from a finance function perspective, having to incorporate emerging technologies, we also see examples of the emerging technologies utilized with bots, RPAs, AI. And this can be used as part of a control, such as the automation of accounts receivable reconciliation, or just an execution of business controls. And a good example of this is the automation of accounts receivable reconciliation, having to have based on specified requirements defined to run on a recurring basis to be able to help the finance function conduct that more efficiently. And then another example may be to better manage a client from a credit and collection perspective and using platforms built purposely for that. And then from a continuous monitoring perspective, it's really having the ability to address the risk coverage internally and having to have gain control efficiency, as well as including the full population, so that there's not necessarily risk of unique transactions that's not identified. And an example may be having to establish possible elements to flag and monitor, let's say, an expense subledger system, such as systematically identifying non-meal expenses that were categorized as meal in some way or manner. So I would say that also FP&A technologies would be less material in the financial audits, supporting forecasting and more so from an operational function perspective. But it's not completely ruled out, because it just really depends on the situation and the scenario. Now we move on to the next trigger. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the trigger to transform may also occur as a company grows and matures. And it can go through a transformation process from establishing the foundations of reporting and governance, such as when you're a startup, to creating value through risk management, optimization, and deeper insights. So for the finance function and the finance operations specifically, the transformation really begins from structuring the budget and the financial close process to building out capabilities to analyze and forecast operational business activities. And as noted here in this illustration, maturing may trigger the interest or demand to optimize finance processes, such as to automate aspects of account reconciliations, to increase efficiency and complete the monthly close in less time, as well as for reporting enhancements, such as developing scenario planning models to be able to essentially quickly reforecast in certain aspects of operations. Now, the CFOs and finance functions are playing a critical role to drive change and to be value creators. With the shift from value protection to value creation, what does this mean? For the finance close, there could be an increasing demand for speed and efficiency, and decreasing the acceptance of spreadsheets, having stronger evidence for audits. And there's also interest to optimize the financial close process through automation. So traditionally, we've looked at, in terms from a close optimization perspective, as a means to downsize a team with less people and time needed to perform the close function. But now, the drive really is to be able to automate the transactional, repetitive work, and to be able to provide the ability to speed up and spend more time on analysis and providing insights in terms of operational needs and what's going on with the business. So I wanted to at least share a little bit of data and statistics around the close cycle. A few years back, there's APQC conducted a general accounting benchmarking survey asking 2,300 organizations what was their cycle time to monthly close. And the average response was that the close was 6 days, and it ranged between 5 to 10 days of all the responses. So the response depended on, at least in terms of when the survey was conducted, the quality of data that was available. So having to have a standard chart of accounts and common definitions across the organization, across different business units and things of that sort. Although it may also depend on the size and the complexity of the organization. But I think it's also important to note that another aspect is the ability to be able to automate routine tasks that support the monthly close process. Technology capabilities are really providing organizations the abilities to optimize finance processes. And from ERP systems with built-in capabilities, purpose-built platforms to specifically address the task, or simply just specific tools such as RPA. So I thought that data might find it interesting for the audience to hear about. And then in terms of FP&A, as CFOs and finance teams execute more quickly, this really allows you to have more time for the team to focus and contribute to strategic and operational decisions. So another aspect of the value creation is to be able to plan and forecast quickly, and particularly with operational activities. So this may include increasing the demand for more immediate and insightful predictions and analysis, as well as adding business value through data-driven decision-making. Now, a good example is supply chain, especially during the past 2 years or so. The effects of the pandemic over the past 2 years have also created huge ebbs and flows in the demand for certain goods and services. And the secondary supply chain effects of the pandemic have in turn created challenges that demand for supply-based reforecasting. And with the shift, it also requires investing in technology. According to 2021 Gartner survey on the CFO perspective, there's an increasing shift from value protection to value creation, and also a prioritization for digital initiatives and investments. So really naturally, this is a trigger to digitalize the finance function. There are other trends too, other trends that include the automation of data collection or gathering, forecasting and incorporating predictive analytics, and then interesting enough, self-service reporting so that business partners can have direct or quick access to data and information. But in order to provide this, it goes back to having to prioritize for digital initiatives and investments in the finance function. Now, there's another survey that I thought would be interesting to share from a data perspective. So according to 2021 Harvard Business Review survey, majority of the survey respondents said that volume of data collected and used by the finance team have increased over the past 2 years that fostered a data-driven culture in finance, and it will be critical for future performance. Organizations who prioritize and place investments in a data hub will be more successful in elevating the FP&A function within finance. So with that, I think we actually have the next polling question I'd like to first share. So what would you consider as the highest priority of concern from a people perspective when engaging in a finance transformation? It could be talent and skill set, competing priorities for the resources, project sponsor and key stakeholders, or distributed workforce, or maybe all of the above. So be interested in seeing what the results are. We'll give it another 10 more seconds, I believe.
It's nice that there's no wrong answers, Janice.
That's right. There's no wrong answers.
Wrong answers. Yep. All of the above.
All of the above. Okay. All right. Well, Steve, I'm going to pass this over to you now.
Thank you. Well, thank you again, everyone, for being here. This is an example from Gartner. And so don't take it as gospel, but it is as the only way to do something. But this is a nice picture of that human machine back and forth, what can be automated, what can't be. But if you haven't caught it yet, the term that we're using is investment. And, why would people invest? Why would we want to automate, optimize, transform our finance area, the processes, the organization, the tools, the systems, data, all of that underlying? Well, typically it's going to be driven, want to, or either you want to or you have to. It could be that there are risks that I've been identifying. Could be opportunities, getting, improve efficiencies, for example. Could also be regulation with increased controls, increased regulations that are out there. Sometimes it can also be the simple things. Actually talked to a company a few weeks ago. We're talking about their intercompany processes. We got to how they approve the charges, the intercompany charges. This person was saying, well, I email so-and-so in that department, and if they don't deny it within 24 hours, then it's approved. So you have an assumed approval. What if they're out or we're sick? How does that work? Well, we'll just deal with that later. And so that's a process. One might argue it's automated using email, but the risk is really high. The opportunity for improvement is significant. And I'm not sure their external auditor would have been happy if they heard what I had heard. And so with that, we look at FP&A, and there has been limited investment in the past 20, 25 years. And so when we start talking about things like RPA, OCR, machine learning, all of these other things, a lot of folks are like, yes, we need that. But where do we start? And so with that, it always starts with people. Yes, people are a risk, but people are also a fantastic asset. And so some of the challenges in the people space, attracting and retaining people with that digital skill set. Ask your HR or talent team how it is to hire people coming out of college with an accounting degree these days. Many of them want to use systems. They want to use technology. Spreadsheets are what their parents used. No offense, I'm using spreadsheets still. They're used to technology. They're used to using technology. They're also coming out wanting that work-life balance. They don't want to spend any weekend, much less the first weekend of any month, doing their close. A lot of folks also have competing priorities. A lot of us are about to undergo, if I haven't started already, ERP migration going to the cloud. You've also got to engage additional stakeholders outside of accounting, not just the CIO or the CEO or COO, but you're looking at the chief technology officer. What are they thinking? What does their application architecture roadmap look like? How do you get involved with that early and be a voice throughout that process? Your CISO, your chief information security officer, this is becoming a higher and higher role, particularly with data and system penetration. I mean, we've seen, it's almost in the news every week, company got hacked. So they are taking a higher and higher elevated role. You need to be a part of that conversation, because simply shutting down access is not the be-all answer. And then operating in a distributed workforce. We all know that. We used to call it the cube walk during the close. How are we doing? Now we've had to replace that with email and spreadsheets, even some folks going back to the office. Here's the deal. None of that is real time. It is not real time information. That's where some of that investment comes in. And again, people are not the risk. They're actually the asset. They're also the driver to change and driver to invest. Think we have another poll? Or, oh, no, we're going straight to the client scenario.
Yes.
Sorry, Janis.
No problem. So great. Well, thanks, Steve, for at least sharing and talking about thoughts from a people and a talent perspective. What we like to do is talk about the client scenario, and what I like to at least provide first is some of the background, and then Steve will walk through in terms of more specifically in terms of the interaction with the client. So with that, to provide an initial background, we have a client that is in the food and the beverage industry, and RGP was engaged with this particular client last year, and I just like to be able to at least provide the background as well as the situation. So the client has over 20 billion in global net sales. Their consumer products rolled up over to essentially over 5 active reporting units, and their operating results consolidated in terms of from a reportable segment perspective by geography. So there's significant global presence. And then they also underwent a merger between 2 entities about 5 years ago. Now, specifically for the finance function, it's organized and led regionally, so North America, LATAM, EMEA, and APAC. And then for the finance close, the technology and the people supporting remain mostly the same after the merger. And mainly, they also had limited staff, resources, and technology capabilities. But based on the scenario, the finance really had limited capacity to evolve over the 5 years, mostly because having to focus on post-merger activities. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the finance function had limited capacity to evolve throughout the 5 years and having to focus on post-merger activities. But with this came pain points for the finance function. And so I like to discuss this through the people, process, and technology perspective. From a people perspective, the task leaders were approaching the process as well as the solution changes more based on reactive drivers and depended significantly on Excel spreadsheets to complete the task. And then from a process perspective, each region functioned and invested in technology and resources independently. There was also a lack of consistent and continuous training for different user audiences. Now, from a technology perspective, the existing technology solutions remained stagnant, and it included outdated functions and features. The lack of awareness on the extent of the software capabilities had led to the technology limitations. And I just want to also mention that earlier from the Gartner survey that one of the CFO's goals is to digitalize the finance function. But then also, understandably, this is also one of the more challenging efforts, having to consider and the people and the process, not just the technology aspect. So with that, now we have the next polling question. So the next polling question, which perspective is your top challenge when initiating or completing a finance optimization and automation project? So from a people perspective, from a process perspective, from a technology perspective, or all of the above. Or if it's not applicable, if you're not currently working on a particular project. So we'll give it just a little bit of time, maybe 15 seconds or so, to allow people to answer.
And there's no wrong answer, right?
There's no wrong answer on this. We're just interested in what you're seeing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of the above. Although it's also interesting to see that that 25% of the audience picked people, because it is a challenging aspect to address as well. So.
And I think it also shows we have a very savvy audience, that technology is actually the least for the folks that applies, because yes, it is important, but I love it that this audience understands that a lot of technology needs to be driven by the people in the process.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Steve. Great point. All right, so take it away, Steve.
All right. So with this particular client, there were some great things, great lessons learned, just some real positives. We have the next slide will sort of build out what that journey looked like for our client. But one of the most important things, and I'm sure we will hear some heads bobbing up and down in agreement, having a strong client sponsor is a must. One who is committed, one who is visionary, one who understands the long-term, the future state. They're not only trying to solve the now, but they're trying to solve down the road. So they're thinking scale, thinking that, yeah, this will solve now, but I don't want to just solve for now, 2, 3, 5 years down the road. That's what I want to solve. I want to try to anticipate. I know we need immediate relief, but we don't want to have to keep trying to solve a little bit at a time every year. And so that is one of the key things that we had. We're very, very fortunate with that. And one of the challenges we found early on, and that the client also had where to start. All of these things that need to be done. All of these things that could be done. Where to start? What needs to be the first one? Can't have 10 all in the first place needing to all be done at the same time. What do we start with? And so working with the client collaboratively, where do we go? And we landed on optimizing the reconciliations. That became the rising tide to lift all boats. It also provided visibility into some other challenges they were having, getting to the root cause of them. But we started with optimizing their reconciliations. Every month, all sorts of challenges. And so starting there. So moving forward, when working together, let's start with what you have. Where are you at now? And so let's improve that transaction processing, improve the quality and that real-time visibility. Those were the objectives, the goals. How do we know that we would be successful? And so with that, got the commitment, got the top-down communication, the bottom-up feedback, if you will, so that we had the closed loop on information so that we knew what the corporate vision was. We also had a path by which to find out what was and what wasn't working from everybody. So that was a great thing to hear it all come together and put it together. So you'll also hear a theme of collaboration here. And it was true from day one, had to be collaborative, and not just with communications, but bidirectional communication, understanding, training, knowledge transfer, and reminding folks, here's what we're doing and why. I applaud the folks who can hear it once, remember it for life. Many of us require hearing it multiple times. So the communication was very, very key and critical. And then the client then dedicated the time and resources as part of that. It wasn't just, here you go, done. It was a collaboration, again, working together. And so as a result, we were able to get some immediate wins and set up an optimization path, a roadmap, if you will, for their EMEA region. This is where that sponsor resided, and this is where he wanted to pull. We're wanting to make his region an example for others, as well as helping alleviate a lot of the challenges they were having within the region. He wanted to, reduce the administrative time that his team was spending, wanted to improve the quality of the reconciliations. He and his boss needed some real-time visibility throughout the close. They want to know where we are, where are we at, what's next? Are we ahead or are we behind? Wanted to also, again, the quality of the reconciliations ties to having more time to do the analysis. In the heart of every good accountant is a numbers detective. I heard that phrase somewhere, never forgotten it. And giving them that time to be analytical and get in there and figure out, why is it this way? Let me do some more investigating, as opposed to try to hurry and I now have to download more data, format more data, and I hope I have time to do just a fraction of time to do the analysis. But as part of that, wanting to increase the efficiencies, but also reduce the rework, reduce the errors, reduce the risk, also reduce the time it took to review, because they were almost having to do as much review time as preparation time because the quality wasn't there as they were trying to rush through it. So all of that with, and I sort of ran through these results on the right here, but one of the third one there, I loved this one, that there were some unexpected savings for the client. When, as we discussed with them, getting them some real-time visibility during the close, one of their folks go, well, what about project XYZ? Not the name of the project. I go, what is that? Well, we're about to kick off a project to build our own tool to provide information out of the close, put it into a report to send it to the executives, but you're telling us we can get it real time? Well, yeah. Tell me about this project. And they explained it, what they were doing, what they were building, the data that was coming in, and what was being reported could be upwards of 30 days after the fact. The fact that we talked to them about a solution that would give them real time, the incidental savings, the accidental savings was, well, I guess they thought, like, well, we don't have to do that project now, do we? How fast can you get me the real-time visibility? Excellent. So this was part of that collaboration, not just finding what we had defined objectives, but here's some additional savings, opportunities, benefits coming along. So with the success in EMEA, a couple of other regions are going, that sounds interesting. Could you maybe help us over here? And then it became a growing rollout globally for them. And then following that, initiating a journal entry automation implementation, which we're in the midst of right now. But all of this, again, collaborative, finding ways to achieve a lot of efficiencies, actually, simultaneously reducing risk, getting standardization, making the external auditor happy. And so all of this has been a really great way to converge it. So I'm going to ask Janis, could we go to the next slide real quickly, please? Oh, good. We got the one that builds. So we put together a timeline to show what this is like. And one of the things as part of making an investment, you heard a couple of things I said earlier. One is where to start. You don't have to do it all at once. You can start small and build from there. And that's what we want to show here. We started with a rapid assessment. What are some quick things you can do in EMEA? And then here's some longer term things. Immediately signed up for that. And that's where we focused on reconciliations and as well as their task management, their close management, if you will, and optimizing that. So started late 2020. Now we're getting into halfway through 2021. And then the next one is Latin America goes, we'd like some of that as well. What you did in EMEA, could you do that for us over here? We have a lot of similar processes, a lot of the same pains though. And so in Q3, Q4 this past year, worked with them to help them get some optimization, get the efficiencies that EMEA was already on being benefited by. And then with EMEA going, this has been great. What else can we do? We then went into automating their journal entry process. And so we know that journal entry, it is an interesting world. And we all know, we all have stories around journal entries. We know that it's required, but boy, can it sometimes be really, really painful. Well, how do we get that standardized? How do we get, the one-offs to be standard? Because if you can standardize it, then you can automate it. And so working with the client, how do we get that pared down? How do we get some more efficiencies on that? And so with us working with EMEA into this year, it didn't take long for a couple of other regions to go, we'd like some of that as well. So working with North America and LATAM, they're like, yeah, we want to be a part of that. Initially, they had said, we'll let Europe go off and do their thing. We're not really interested in that. We'll let them go do it. Then they heard their colleagues in Europe got some efficiencies. They actually got time to do analysis work during close. They also shortened their close and they actually got to go on holiday, if you will. And so Latin America, North America are like, yeah, can we be involved with that a little sooner than we thought we might want it to be? And so we pulled them in sooner and are continuing to work with them as we help them automate journal entry. And of course, not to be left out, APAC said, we'd like to start working on our reconciliations, our close management as well. Can you help us with that? Certainly. And so what we did in Europe that then went to Latin America, then we went end of last year into this year, helping APAC as well, helping them get a lot of benefit from gaining, with the efficiency gains, improvement of controls, standards, all of that. And so when I say journey, the journey's not over, as you can tell with the arrows, but I'm just guessing. I'm not going to guess out loud. I'm just wondering when APAC is going to go, could you help us automate our journal entry processes as well, please? Come back later, ask us here in a few months, and we can give you an update on this journey that we are taking with the client. Right? Our next question. This is number 4. If you've only done 2, you have to do this one. So what aspect? Great. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention the question. So what aspect of the webinar was the most meaningful to you or resonated the most? Was it the discussion about the project sponsor, having to have communications, breaking up the efforts into components, or investments? So again, and I always liked when Steve talk about from a client interaction perspective, showing the timeline. It just always really illustrates what a great way to be able to work with the client, but in pieces and components. So.
Sure. Wow. Almost half.
That's great.
That's
Breaking
awesome.
up efforts into components is over 50%.
Yes. Edible portions, consumable portions. So absolutely. No, that's great.
Wow, that's great. Yes, spot on. Okay. So, if we have more time, we definitely would talk more about the situation. But with the time that we have, what we'd like to talk about is just more so summarizing the lessons learned from the experience in working with the client. And so I will highlight some of these points, and then Steve will capture at the end as well. So what I wanted to just mention is that, Steve really illustrated how we're able to successfully help transform our client's finance function. And that also requires a partnership between us and the client. I want to emphasize the importance of that. But there are also a number of elements to consider from the lessons learned perspective, and that we talked about throughout the earlier discussion. So one is having a project sponsor. This is such a vital role. It's having to champion the project within the organization, as well as be able to provide the vision that aligns to the company's business objectives, as well as providing the project governance needed at the organization level. So two is having to understand and prioritize the need. So with multiple pain points, it's really important to be able to listen, work, and collaboration, as well as to be able to just prioritize and determine a starting point to focus on. Three, the training and the knowledge sharing. This is really an important aspect, especially around the people perspective. It's really important to dedicate the time and the team resources to training and knowledge sharing so that there's a successful acceptance of the process and the technology changes. And as mentioned earlier, that from the Gartner source, that one of the key goals for CFOs is to digitalize the finance function. But this also includes upgrading the digital competencies of the finance team so that you can enable the digital implementation. 4, understand solution capabilities. So having a proactive understanding of the solution capabilities and features available in order to maximize the spend and the process improvement opportunities to achieve set goals. And then 5, understand short-term, long-term roadmap when investing in the technology capabilities to be able to define the short-term goals versus long-term, and with the resources available, just be able to set pace to successfully accomplish. And then also kind of in line with the polling results, just being able to break these down into components and consumable portions. And then of course, lastly, investment. So Steve, would you talk about this a bit?
Sure. It's a drum I love to continue beating. That, it's been 20, 25, 30 years since we really invested in the back office. And in my rarely humble opinion, it's time we need to do it again. Over time, things have just increased. And I really do believe we are at that inflection point where just adding people and spreadsheets, it's not scalable. It's not going to be able to continue going forward. And so with that, going into the next slide, really wanting to transform finance and accounting. If you I think we've all heard about the frog in the pot. If you put them in hot water, they immediately jump out. If you put in cold water, slowly bring up the heat, they won't hop out. And I believe that's what has happened in the accounting and finance, or finance and accounting space for the past 20 or so years. Increased regulations, increased volumes of data. That article, I do recommend it, Harvard Business Review that Janis referenced earlier. Just the sheer geometric increase in the amount of data coming in that has to be taken into consideration. That right there, it's not to scare, it's to help urge the investment. Again, just can't keep adding people in spreadsheets. And so with that increased regulation, what can be offloaded and let a system take care of it for us? The mundane, the administrative, extract data, format data. Is there a way a system can do that for us? Is there some tool or whatever? How do I do it so that I'm getting the efficiencies, but I'm not increasing risk or potential errors? And again, can start small, can grow. And a lot of it also has to do with going at the right pace. Change isn't easy. Folks need to be able to have change at their pace, but at the right level of tension. Can't go too slow, can't go too fast. But as you can tell, change is inevitable. Best way to get ahead of it, or best thing to do, is to get ahead of it and get started. And we love partnering with our clients. And a lot of this, where we have listed down here below, many things that can be done to help, can assess, automate, data analytics, any number of these with which we partner with our clients to help them gain the efficiencies that they want, help their teams, help their people, and really just make things better. Like I said, I think we're overdue for an investment. And thank you for being here today. I hope this has been meaningful to you. I hope it's been helpful. And I think if we have time, are we opening it up for questions?
Yeah, we have a little bit of time left, so maybe a little over 5 minutes. And so, Steve, I wanted to take this time to see if, and for the audience, you're welcome to send in the question if you'd like as well, just to ping us. But I think initially I'll start off with a question in terms of just what type of unexpected complexities have you encountered just working with our clients to optimize and automate their finance function? I'd be interested in kind of getting your perspective on that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost never the people. Surprisingly, it's the unknown. When we get into close automation, optimization, it's like a kitchen light turning on in a dirty kitchen. You're finding things you didn't know were there, or things that you just got used to having them be there, things that would then need to be cleaned up. And so it's been interesting, the reactions that folks have had. Sometimes it is systems that are antiquated or have been so customized, it's really hard to figure out what's going on. Data is another one. Data is huge. And my prediction over the next 3 years or so, as folks are migrating ERPs into the cloud, is there going to be a lot of unknowns in your data, a lot of surprises, hopefully minimal on the unpleasant surprises, but I do think data is going to be a key impact to a lot of successful ERP migrations to the cloud. How's that?
Yeah, and that's a great point on the data, having data governance. And I think also one of the surveys I mentioned earlier, having a data hub, just a lot of the higher volume of data now that's within the finance function, and being able to best manage that. So great point on data. Now, I guess another question for you then is that what have you seen organizations should do or avoid when they're trying to optimize or automate their finance function and the resulting outcomes?
Well, great question. And you can't communicate enough. Communicate the vision, communicate the purpose, communicate the progress. And a lot of times folks they don't understand what's in it for them. They see change many times as being something, I've been comfortable doing this. I have my precious spreadsheet. I've been doing this for a while. Change is difficult. It is not easy, and I get that. And I just think that communication help folks understand what we're doing, why we're doing it. Don't assume everybody understands it at the same way or that everybody is on board at the, pushing and pulling in the same direction. And so communication is totally key. That goes back to that sponsor with the vision, and following that, systems follow. People are the greatest benefit to any project being successful.
Great. And then I think I'm just going to also mention one other question. As you mentioned about the people perspective and the project sponsor. So maybe talking a little bit about the human element or the human perspective on that a little bit. And then I'm going to check for another question that came in.
Oh, sure. And this is very true that it's got to be collaborative. Folks need to feel like they are a part of the decision-making, a part of the solution. And that's part of that visioning going in there. But the collaborative aspects are huge, because when folks understand that others are there to help them, not hinder them, when you see that light bulb go off, it's like, great, let's work on this. Let's get it done together. That's not to say everybody's going to be on board. Some folks are always going to resist change just because it's change. I understand it's not difficult, but the communication is key, collaboration is key, and helping them understand what's in it for them. And if somebody is really, really pushing back or resistant, spend a little time with them. Find out why. They may have knowledge of something that won't work that you think is working. So you don't want to just casually dismiss them or abruptly dismiss them. Find out what's there. And if it's a misunderstanding, great, let's get that addressed. And then now we're all headed in the same direction.
Great. Well, thank you, Steve, for answering some of those questions. And we just want to thank you for your time today in terms of participating in this webinar session. This has been a great participation, great participating and co-presenting with my co-presenter here. Steve, do you have any last comments or questions or last comments that you'd like to share?
Just thank everyone. Thank you all for being here, and just realize it's a journey. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and others are on this same journey with you.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.